Hi everybody, welcome back to another ukulele lesson. I'm Nelson Silva and today we're going to take a look at the new Horizons version of Kapp'n Song. In my previous lesson, we went over the original version of Kapp'n Song from Animal Crossing New Leaf, but here we are again, because believe it or not, the new Horizons version is played a little bit differently. Now, there are a lot of things that have not been changed, so I really recommend also watching my lesson about the New Leaf version because it goes over things like strumming pattern, melody, and other things that have remained the same in this version. So, as always, make sure to get that free PDF from the description of this video. It's the best way to follow along. All right, let's make sure our ukuleles are tuned. Now, if you've watched my other lesson videos, you might have noticed me often throwing around the word voicing. So why don't we talk a little bit about what a chord voicing is? Let's compare the first measure of the new Horizons version of Kapp'n Song to the first measure of the original version from New Leaf. Both versions start with the same chord, A major. But if we compare the tab, everything is different. So, why is this and this both classified as A major? If we look at the names of the notes in each chord, they both contain A, C sharp, and E. Since they have the same note names, they both have the same chord name. But since the notes in each chord are arranged differently, we call them different voicings. So, just for fun, let's take this idea a step further and see if we can come up with some more voicings of the A major chord. First, we need to find the locations of every A, C sharp, and E on the fretboard. Sounds like a lofty task, but here they are. Let's play around with this a little bit so we can see where all of our A's, C sharps, and E's are. So let's just try putting some of them together. As long as we have at least one of each, it's gonna be an A major chord. So we know this one. That's what we're gonna play in New Horizons. And this is the one that we played before in New Leaf. But let's see, what if we put A here, C sharp there, E there, and this is pretty much the one from New Horizons so far. But let's add a C sharp on top. This is actually one of my favorite voicings of the A major chord on the ukulele. We could go up here. Try to get that bar with your ring finger. Or we could double the A up here. As you can see, there's a lot of ways we can be creative, even though we're still playing the same chord. What if we did this? What if we utilized the open strings? You know, we have an E and an A there. So down here, once again, that's the voicing we're gonna use today in New Horizons. This one doesn't have a C sharp in it though. So technically that's not a full A chord, but if you liked how it sounded, you know, at least you're using some of the notes, you could probably use that. So there you go. That's just an example of how useful it is to know where all the notes from a chord are on the fretboard. You can put them together, sort of mix and match, and create your own versions or voicings of the same chord. If you found this fretboard diagram useful or interesting, you might be happy to hear that I actually made one for every chord in Kapp'n Song. There is a link to this PDF in the description of this video. You can use these diagrams to come up with a ton of different ways to play the chords in this song and learn a lot in the process. Speaking of playing the chords in this song, I think it's time we move on to the next part of this video. All right, so let's start out by looking at section A. Section A starts at measure 1 and goes through measure 8. So we're looking at measures 1 and 2, and we already talked about this a little bit. It's going to be the A major chord. In the previous section of this video, we already talked a little bit about this, but I'll just summarize really quick. In the old version of Kapp'n Song, in Animal Crossing New Leaf, we played it like this. With only these 3 strings, we left out the G string. But now what we're doing is we're actually playing one of the same notes twice, which is interesting. This is, I feel like I've mentioned this before. This is the most common voicing of A major, I think. I think if you know the A major chord, this is probably the voicing of it you know. Doubling that note really gives it that ukulele-y sound. So let's go ahead and move on to measure 3 and 4. Measure 3 and 4 are both going to be the same chord. It's going to be the C sharp minor chord, and you've probably noticed so far that these are the same chord names that we started with in New Leaf. You know, in case I haven't mentioned this yet, all of the chord names in the New Horizons version of Kapp'n Song, well, almost all of them, are the same chord names as they were in Animal Crossing New Leaf. So today what we're really focusing on is just learning how to play different voicings of all of those chords, and in a couple cases, adding or removing a note to make it technically a different chord. So looking at measure 3 and 4, we're going to play the C sharp minor, and in New Leaf we played it like this. And all we're going to do is we're going to double that C sharp down here on the G string. It gives us this. This is definitely not as smooth of a transition between these chords as it was in Animal Crossing New Leaf, where we had A major right here, and then we just removed a finger. New Horizons goes like this. New Leaf went like this. A little bit smoother sounding in New Leaf because we're keeping more of the same notes. So that's about all I have to say about the C sharp minor chord. Let's move on already to measure 5. This is probably a good time for me to remind you that I'm not really going to talk about the strumming pattern in this video. That's something I went over extensively in the previous lesson on the version from Animal Crossing New Leaf. So if you want to know about the strumming pattern, just want to remind you to go check out that New Leaf lesson because I go in depth on that strumming pattern there. So in measure 5, we're going to play a D major chord. This is a very common voicing of the D major chord on ukulele. The way we're going to do it is, I would say, try to bar these 3 strings with one finger. Now the hard part here is that we're barring these 3 strings, but the A string needs to be open, okay? So here's what this means. You need to bar it, and you have to bend your finger back a little bit. So we're gonna be kind of bending our finger if you can. Don't push yourself, don't hurt yourself if you can't get that note to ring out. If there's a single note in this chord that is expendable, I'd say it's that one because, once again, we're doubling a note. So if this one isn't ringing out, you know, it's not worth hurting your finger over. Some people are more flexible than others, so this might come a little bit more naturally to some people than other people. But if you do have trouble with this, just practice it gently, and over time, you can become a little bit more flexible and get the hang of it. Some of it is flexibility, and some of it is finger placement, getting your finger in the right spot. You don't have to bend that far. Whoops. If you touch it just a little bit, if you're not bending enough, you're gonna get a buzz in there. The funny thing, if you listen really closely to the New Horizons version, you're gonna actually hear a little bit of buzzing in there. There's a lot of chords here in this song that are up ahead that use this technique of barring but bending up to clear one of the strings and keep that string open. And if you listen to the New Horizons version, you can hear a bit of buzzing in there. So we've got our D major chord. By the way, if you were wondering, this is the version we had in New Leaf. It was all the way up here. So we're playing it quite a bit lower. Oops, there's that buzz. Another way that you can try to play D major is the way that we play the A major chord on the guitar. And what we do in that case is 1, 2, 3. Try to fit them all on the same fret. It makes it a lot easier to play this cleanly and not have this bar in the way of that string. But the challenge here is it depends on the size of your ukulele, the size of your hand. Could be kind of hard to fit all your fingers in that position. So let's look at measure 6. This is the first point in the song where the chord name is actually different than what it was in Animal Crossing New Leaf. So in Animal Crossing New Leaf, we played D sharp diminished in measure 6. We essentially just added a finger to the D major chord, changed that D to a D sharp. But in the New Horizons version, we have the chord D sharp diminished 7. So there's a couple ways that we could do the fingering for this. I'll start by showing you the way that I do it. We're here for D major. Since we already have this bar, I go like this. I add these 2 fingers. That way, I keep a common finger. I don't have to move everything. The other ways that you could go about doing this, here's probably the most popular. 1, 3, 2, 4. Those are the finger numbers as we go up. It's kind of like this zigzag pattern. So this is a lot of fingers to push down, and if you haven't practiced this chord, this could be kind of challenging doing it this way. But this is a fine way to play it. I like to do it the other way because I already have the finger down for the bar anyway. And by the way, I listened to the New Horizon version of Kapp'n Song a lot, very closely, and I even slowed it down. And if you listen really closely in there, you can hear the fingers, a little bit of that kind of sound, which tells me that the performer is lifting up their fingers between the D major chord and the D sharp diminished 7 chord. So if doing it, you can do it however you want. In the original version, it's not a super smooth transition between those two chords anyway. So let me show you another way to play this chord if you want to try it. This is usually my favorite way to do it. I start with these fingers basically in the same positions that I have them in for a G7 chord. G7 would be right here, but I'm going to scoot them up right there. And then I just grab the 2nd fret with my thumb. I'm going to recommend doing this chord in this shape later in the song, so we'll see that later. But for now, I'd say at first try it like this, with the bar. There's one more thing about the way that the D sharp diminished 7 is played in this song. And this is another reason why I like to do it with the bar, is because if you look at the tab, one of the strums has a different note on top than the rest. It sounds like this. So for a moment there, that A is doubled. Technically, this is a D sharp diminished chord. Well, not technically, I mean it is. And then on beat 2, we add the 7th, which is C, to make it a D sharp diminished 7. This could have been on purpose, like a creative choice. I mean, it does sound cool. Or it could have just been what I'll call an artifact of human performance. It could just be that when they were switching between D major and D sharp diminished 7, maybe this top note, either they didn't hit it when they were strumming at first, or perhaps one of their fingers was a beat late. So might have been on purpose, might have been, I'm not gonna call it a mistake, but might not have been on purpose, but they decided to leave it in there, so couldn't have been that big of a mistake. I like it. So something else that I wanted to mention, because I get this question a lot from my students, is why 7? Why D sharp diminished 7? So I'll give you a really quick, brief explanation for this. This is a bigger topic, but I'm gonna keep it short. So the original chord that we played in Animal Crossing New Leaf was just a D sharp diminished chord. We had a D sharp, an F sharp, and an A. Now in the D sharp diminished 7 chord that we're playing today, we still have a D sharp, an F sharp, and an A, but we're adding the note C. So here's where the number 7 comes in. We've added the note C, and if we start on D, go up the alphabet to C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. 7. Like I said, there's a lot more to this, but that's about the simplest way I can explain it. Doesn't have anything to do with the 7th fret, doesn't have anything to do with anything else. It's just the fact that C is a 7th up from D sharp, and we're adding that to the D sharp diminished chord. So we have a D sharp diminished 7 chord. Can we go on to the next chord now? I think so. So let's look at the last chord in section A. This is the E major chord. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, the way that we played the E major chord was we took the voicing for D major and moved up a whole step, or in other words, 2 frets, right here. Nice high climactic point to leave off on at the end of that section. But in this version, we're gonna play E major down here, and this is probably gonna be the hardest chord shape in the whole song. We're gonna have to do that thing that I was talking about with the bar, where we bar and bend our finger to clear the A string, but we're gonna do it with our ring finger instead. So I'm barring these 3 strings down here, and then I'm gonna play the 2nd fret up here. Once again, this is a little bit about bending and a lot about placing your finger properly. And it's also about keeping your finger straight along with the frets, parallel with the frets, if you will. I suppose another tip that I can think of if you're having trouble with this, which you very well could be, this is a challenging chord. Another tip that I have is to try to center your thumb between those 2 fingers. Make sure your thumb is not up here, not over here, not ahead. These are all ways, wherever your thumb is really gonna affect the position of the rest of your hand. So by putting your thumb in between those fingers, underneath the 3rd fret, that's going to provide some nice counter pressure when you play this chord. All right, so that's everything that we need to do in section A. Let me play through that whole thing for you slowly, and so you can see how it all goes together. Then we're gonna move on to section B. Okay, let's get into section B. Section B goes from measure 9 to measure 18. So we'll start out by talking about measure 9. There's not a whole lot to say here. We already went over this chord. It's the A major chord. Same voicing we played in the beginning of the song. This is the same voicing we're going to use for A major anytime we go to A major in this song. We're going to use this voicing of it. So measure 9 is the A major chord. Measure 10, we have a new chord for the song. We have F sharp. This is a really smooth transition between these 2 chords. We're just adding 1 finger, changing one of the notes. This is some very smooth voice leading. So when you do this, make sure, of course, that you're not lifting up fingers 2 and 1. I mention this a lot in all of my lesson videos. You know, if you don't need to pick up a finger, don't, because it's going to make your transitions faster and it's going to make them sound smoother. So A major to F sharp minor. By the way, let's compare this voicing of F sharp minor to the voicing that we used in the New Leaf version. We played F sharp minor up here. New Horizons. New Leaf. And in the New Leaf version, we also just had to add 1 finger to create the F sharp minor chord. After F sharp minor, we're going to the D major chord. We're looking at measure 11 right now. This is the same voicing that we did before, but I do have one thing to mention. If you can, you'll get the smoothest transition by barring with your middle finger this time, because we already have our middle finger on that fret for A major, F sharp minor, and then if we just smash it down to make the D major, that would be the best way of going about this. You just have to make sure you can do that bend right here to clear the A string and keep that ringing out. I think that this is actually probably how the original performer for this version fingered this chord, if you listen to measures 9, 10, and 11 in this song, you might notice that the transitions here are really smooth, more so than the transitions between the chords in the rest of the song, where I hear a lot of cutting off of the notes at the last second right before we go to the next chord, which suggests they're, maybe lifting up their fingers. In this case, I think they are probably doing this bar with the second finger, and that's why it comes out so smooth. So the rest of section B is actually the same as it was in New Leaf. The only difference is that we're doubling one of the notes that are already in the chord, literally the same note, literally a unison. So we're on to measure 12. This is an E major chord. This is the same voicing that we used in measure 7. You can do a double bar for this chord, barring with the first finger on the second fret, and then also barring with the ring finger for just these 3 strings on the 4th fret, bending up to clear that A string. It's a tricky shape. It'll take some practice, but if you're able to get the hang of it, this will help you transition smoothly to the next chord, which we'll talk about now. So we're at measure 13. We're going to a C sharp minor chord. This is the same voicing that we did in measure 3 and 4. A bar with the first finger, and then just 1 fret on the G string with the ring finger. The reason I suggested the double bar was because then when you go from E and you slide up, see how all I'm doing is just rocking that finger up like that out of the way onto the tip. I don't know if I can get a good angle of this. E major, and then C sharp minor. A little bit hard to see that one. Of course, if you're having trouble with the double bar, I should have said this, you don't have to do the double bar. You can just jump your finger over like that. After C sharp minor, we're gonna play F sharp minor again, but this time it is a different voicing from what we did before. It's actually the voicing that we used in the New Leaf version, but with a doubled note. In the New Leaf version, we did it this way. And today we're going to use slightly different fingers. I'm gonna put my ring finger, instead of on this string, I'm gonna want it down here so that I can get my pinky also on the 6th fret, but on the C string. So this is a little tight right there. Might have to angle your fingers a little bit like that. I know I'm always talking about keeping your fingers parallel with the frets, but when you need to fit more than 1 finger on the same fret, you can see here, things aren't fitting so well, but if I angle my fingers, I'm able to get them both in there. I'm gonna actually play this with a bar though, because I was just coming from C sharp minor. So let's keep everything and then just add those 2 fingers in there. Keeping a bar, but really just playing 1 string with that barred finger. So next what we need to do in measure 15, we gotta scoot our hand up 1 fret, lift up the pinky, and hop down here with our middle finger. So let me do that one more time for you. F sharp minor, lifting these 2 and sliding, and then putting the middle finger right there. This gives us the D major chord. Not the same voicing that we did earlier in the song, but the same voicing that we had in Animal Crossing New Leaf. Once again, just doubling the note that's on the A string down here on the G string. So now we're on to the D sharp diminished 7 chord again. So we're up here, it's the same voicing as, oh, I guess I lied earlier. This is the same voicing as New Leaf. We are adding a note to the G string, but since it's a D sharp diminished 7 this time, we're actually adding a different note that's not in the chord. So the way that I would recommend doing the fingering for this chord, I like using the thumb down here. I mentioned this earlier in the video when we were talking about this chord in section A, that later we were going to use the thumb to make this chord. So here's how we're going to play it. That's your D sharp diminished chord. Let's take your thumb and grab the 5th fret down there. And that's where we're adding the note C. So this is the same shape that we did from before, but you might notice we're not on the same fret. Earlier we did it down here, and now we're doing it up here. The diminished 7 chord, or sometimes we call it the fully diminished 7 chord, there's something special about it. When we play it in different places on the neck, it's still the same shape everywhere. There are other shapes you can do, but this is one chord where those are all the same chord. Those are all a D sharp diminished 7 chord. Well, depending on where you put it, you might want to change the name. When we make this chord shape, this is pretty different than what we were doing before. D major was like this. Now we're jumping over like this. The key to making this smooth is going to be to keep your middle finger down and kind of pivot your whole hand around that middle finger. Of course, if you'd prefer to just keep the bar and scrunch your finger up here onto that fret, you can do that. But again, it's a situation where it depends on the size of your ukulele and the size of your hand. We're getting a little bit higher up on the fretboard now, and the frets are getting closer together. So crunching all your fingers in there is going to be more of a challenge in this area than it was down here. So let's talk about measure 17 and 18. This is the E major chord. It's the same voicing that we did in New Leaf, and it's the same voicing that we used for the D major chord a second ago, but we're moving it up 2 frets. All the rest of the chords in this song, pretty much I talked about really specific ways to be strategic about switching between them, making sure it's smooth. But this measure starts with an 8th rest, which means since we're in 6/8, we get a whole beat of silence, and that gives us a chance to transition over to this chord. So, you know, whether you're like this for D sharp diminished 7 or you're like this for D sharp diminished 7, you have a moment to just hop right up here to E major. Like I said, it's the same voicing from New Leaf. We have doubled the note from the A string down onto the G string. If you really want to cut off that chord quickly, you can just lift off your fingers. Not lift them, I'd say release the pressure. That'll mute that chord really fast. Ooh, let's see if I can do this. So I'm not really lifting my fingers, I'm just not squeezing anymore. And the string tension naturally kind of pushes my fingers away. And that'll mute that chord. Sometimes for a little added muting power, I kind of drop my pinky down on there as well. And that really cuts it off right away. By the way, if you're very perceptive, you might notice that we're doubling a lot of these notes in the same way. We're taking a note from the A string and moving it up 2 frets and all the way across to the G string. Wherever you do that on a ukulele, you always get the same note. Just a good thing to keep in mind, especially if you're having trouble with a certain chord shape, like the bar on the D major chord, and you can't get one of the strings, maybe in this case the A major string, to ring out. at least you can rest knowing that you are at least getting all of the notes in the chord. You're just not doubling one of them. So yeah, this is what I would call a unison, because it is literally the same note, just on a different string. And if you have ever tuned a ukulele by this sort of strategy, then you'll know that this is, the second fret is where you tune the G string to the A string, or vice versa. Okay, so that's everything from section B. I'm gonna play through it slowly, and then we're gonna talk about the chords in section C. Okay, so here we are at section C. This is the final stretch of the song. Section C goes from measure 19 to 28. So we're actually gonna skip measure 19. Well, not skip it, I mean, there's just nothing for us to do there. We're going to start at measure 20 with the A major chord, same one as before. And then we go to F sharp minor, just like we did before. And then we go to C sharp minor. We're gonna play this the same way we did before. So now let's look at measure 23. Measure 23 has two chords in it. It's the only measure of this song where we switch chords partway through the measure, rather than starting the measure with one chord and following through with that chord all the way through until the next measure. So we start this measure with the C sharp minor chord, the same chord we were doing in measure 22. And then another special thing about this measure is that we're actually, this is the only point in the New Horizons version of Kapp'n Song where the chord name is not just slightly different than it was in Animal Crossing New Leaf. This is the only chord that is a totally different chord name. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, we had C sharp minor, and then we went down to C diminished. But in Animal Crossing New Horizons, they decided to go C sharp minor, D sharp diminished. So two of these notes are the same as they were in New Leaf. C diminished is here, and D sharp diminished is here. If you're very perceptive, you might notice that if you put these both together, you get the D sharp diminished 7. So the way that I recommend doing the D sharp diminished chord in this situation, I really think you should bar these 3 strings just like you're doing a D major chord the way we were doing before. And then just add your middle finger onto the 3rd fret of the C string. This is gonna work really well when we transition into the next measure. You know, I have to insert my opinion here. I think that I really liked the C diminished chord from the New Leaf version a lot better than this. I really liked how things were kind of descending on the A string. You have we would call this a chromatic descent on that top voice. Yeah, I really liked that. And now it sounds like this instead. So it's kind of bouncing around a little bit more. I don't know, you didn't come here for my opinions, you just came here to learn the song, but I couldn't help but say it. And I thought a lot about why they took this note out, because why didn't they just do the D sharp diminished 7 like before? Right? Like that would work, but I think I know the reason. Perhaps the person who was playing ukulele on this, maybe they thought that the C up here clashed with the note that Kapp'n was singing, the melody note, because for a moment there, during that C diminished chord in New Leaf, we do have a B natural right here. So let's see if I can play both of these notes at the same time. So C would be here, and here would be B. You can hear that's pretty dissonant. So maybe when Kapp'n was going like this with his voice, the ukulele performer decided that this C diminished chord would clash a little bit. So anyway, but that's that. So we have our D sharp diminished chord down here. And then we're gonna go on to measure 24. We have a B minor, and you remember I recommended doing a bar for the D sharp diminished chord, because now we'll go like this. We'll just lift off the middle finger, smash that bar down, add the ring finger right there, and we have our B minor chord. So D sharp diminished, B minor. This is the same voicing that we used in New Leaf, but we are doubling this note, just like before, 2 frets up and all the way across. We get the same note right there. So you could call this the same voicing as before. Okay, and now we're going on to measure 25. This is another chord with a slightly different name. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, we played E7 like this. I feel really bad that in the New Leaf lesson, I said that this was an awkward way to play it, because you never know what you've got until it's gone. In Animal Crossing New Horizons, we're gonna play an E major chord instead of an E7 chord like we did in New Leaf. We're gonna play E major the same way that we did before, and we're gonna roll it out a little bit. So don't strum it too fast, just kind of try to get it less buzzy than me. But yeah, I really miss this chord. I really liked how this sounded compared to this. You know, earlier I talked about how we took a D sharp diminished chord and we added the 7th, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We added a C to the D sharp diminished chord and made it a D sharp diminished 7. In this case, we've done the opposite. So we had an E7, or the full name would be an E dominant 7 or an E major minor 7. There's a few different ways you could call this chord, but most commonly we call it E7. So it was an E major chord, and we added E, F, G, A, B, C, D to the top of it. So we had that before. Even though in New Leaf we weren't playing all 4 of those notes, we were it would still be classified as an E7 chord. But now what we've done is we've taken off the 7 and we just get a regular E major chord. Here come my opinions again. I really liked that E7 because it was nice and high, and that 7th really added a little bit of tension. It was such an inquisitive kind of chord. It was almost like ending this little bit with a question that got answered by the 3 chords in the end. But whatever. Not an opinion video. It's a lesson video, right? So yeah, we go from B minor to the E major. And now we're on to measure 26 through, well, let's talk about measure 26, 27, and 28 all together. We're gonna go from A major to, for the first time and only time in this song, to D minor. We have a common finger there. Try to keep that second finger on the second fret there. And then we end on A major. And I think I mentioned before that we were playing 4 strings for every chord in this song, but I guess I lied because we're actually only gonna play 3 strings. Yeah, when I was listening to the recording of the New Horizons version, I don't hear, I hear all the notes go from low to high. If we play all 4 strings, da, 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 it jumps down in the middle there. So I think that's why they chose to start strumming from this string. You don't have to really mute anything. You can just take, I think your thumb would be best, and roll through that. And that's how Kapp'n Song ends. These 3 chords, man, they really have kind of almost like a, I almost want to say like a bit of a romantic, sort of bittersweet feel to them. That D minor is a special chord. If you want a technical term for this pattern of chords, you could call this a minor pelagal cadence, because it's utilizing what we call the minor 4 chord in the key of A major. I probably forgot to mention this in this video, but Kapp'n Song is in the key of A major. So usually in the key of A major, we have a D major chord, like you saw earlier in the song. A lot of D major chords. We're gonna take the F sharp from that chord. We're going to lower it down to an F natural. Give it that special, bittersweet, romantic flavor. So I could go on about this for a lot longer. I could make a whole video about this. Actually, I did go on about this a lot longer when I was filming the previous lesson video, but I cut it out because it's kind of a tangent. But anyway, if you want to learn more about this, look up the minor 4 chord or the minor pelagal cadence. That would be a good place to start learning more about this, this pattern of chords. So there's one other little thing that I liked about the ending in the New Leaf version. I liked having that C sharp on top of the last chord. And I wanted to share with you a way that you could add that sound to this chord if you liked that ending also. I think I mentioned this voicing in the voicing section of this video, where we were talking about different chord voicings. You can actually keep everything the same with that A major chord. Add the C sharp up here with your pinky. I used to do this a lot when I would play the song. I actually used these low voicings for the end of the song when I would cover it. And I would do a little thing like this. Okay, so that's the end of section C, and actually the end of the song. Let me play section C slowly so you can see how it all fits together. What I hope for you is that you take the chord shapes and the chord voicings that we learned today and in the previous lesson and remember them. And next time you're playing a song that has these chords or you're writing your own song, you remember that you have these voicings that you can try to put in there and see how it sounds. Don't forget that I have a link to a PDF of fretboard diagrams like I showed you earlier in this video that show the locations of all the notes in each of these chords all over the fretboard. So if you want to use that, you could come up with even more chord voicings. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you like this video, make sure you comment if you have any questions. All that fun engagement stuff really helps out the video, really helps out the channel. Hope to see you in the next lesson.